Well, it's finally time to start working on the E30. We're getting close to getting the RHD ITBs on, but first I'm going to install the Megasquirt 2 standalone ECU. The ITBs won't actually run very well, if at all, with the stock ECU on the E30, so I got to switch over to a aftermarket standalone unit, and then with that I should be able to get the ITBs on and running. I should have a base tune somewhere to work with the Megasquirt, so my plan is to get that installed and then get that running on the base tune just to make sure everything works. I haven't had the unit in the car for several years, so I just want to be able to double check it with something that I know should work on the stock engine, and then once we're good there, I'll go and get the ITBs installed. So I originally used the Megasquirt 2 ECU probably 6 or 7 years ago when I had a bored and stroked 2.9 liter M20. So I have the old wiring harness. It's basically just the stock unit, but there are, I think, 2 or 3 sensors that you have to rewire, basically just flipping pins. What I actually want to do is put the old wiring harness in because it already has those sensors spliced in, so I don't have to cut up the new one that's currently in the car. And then, you know, if I ever have to go back to stock ECU, I'll have a harness that's ready to go for that. Or, you know, I could potentially sell it, try to recoup a little bit of money on this project. The Megasquirt version that I had was actually put into a stock ECU box, so it, you know, everything looks normal except for this dongle that hangs off the backside. That'll allow me to plug in the laptop to it. There's also like a pressure sensor so that I can run a vacuum line from the intake to the unit. I still think I'm missing 1 or 2 things. I think it'll be easy enough to start by switching over the harnesses and just kind of getting the engine bay ready for the ITBs. Maybe while I'm in here, I can clean it up a little bit. Looking over the old harness, I do have to admit there are quite a few little dodgy spots on here. This is inside the cabin. Don't really know what's happening there. This, I believe, should be the throttle position sensor, how you have to flip around a couple wires. This wire's deteriorating. This fun wire, trace it out. Terrible splice. Another. What did it go to? I can't remember. And then we have basically, I guess the most important thing for me right now is this sensor, which should be the intake or idle air temperature sensor. I don't have one of these and Megasquirt needs one, so I'm glad it was still attached. I do think that's most of the wires undone. I'll go into the car, unhook it from the current ECU, and see if I can fish out the wiring harness now. I gotta say, as I get the engine harness out, I think to myself, man, it probably would have been better just to leave the one in there and splice in the few sensors that I need. I think it was gonna be more of a hassle to take it out. The harness is out. I went through and just labeled everything where it connected, so I can try to kind of mock that up on the other harness to make sure I'm plugging in everything where it needs to be. That really ratty wire was also ratty on the harness in the car, and it is actually I think it's the oil level. I don't think there's an oil pressure. I think it's the oil level sensor that runs over the accessory belt with like the coolant pass over in the front of the engine to the passenger side of the engine near the crankshaft position sensor. So it's over there. Just looks as bad as the other one, so I don't really know. I'm just gonna leave it for now. Got the harness out, the older harness ready to go back in. Started with this side. I basically fished it through, and then this area, everything's connected except for what should be my O2 sensor. I vaguely remember when I was doing this, the wideband had a different shaped clip, I guess, from what the actual harness clip looks like. So this is one of the harness clips. It's this round connector. And then if I come over here to my pile, the Innovate, I think it's the Innovate LC2 is the wideband that I bought. I think that's what it was called, Innovate 2 something, letters in between. It's this kind of oval oblong looking shape. I can't remember what I did previously, so I'll have to try to look back and see how I connected it. I am trying to use an old wideband. I'll have to clean it up. It's a little carbon covered. It worked fine. Only had it for about a year before I took it off, and I'll go ahead and figure out how to get that hooked up. Not just yet. I want everything else kind of connected first. I'll go through, get everything else hooked up, and then I'll kind of revisit this once I have some time to think about it. Here's the rest of my harness mess that I have to hook up. Previously, I think the harness was run a little wrong when the engine was swapped back in. It was basically squeezed in between two coolant hoses that run kind of into the heater core, I guess. So it was very difficult to kind of fish the rest of the harness back through that. What I'm gonna do for this side is go above those hoses and just kind of fill this area. I think once I get the ITBs in, I can move it around. For now, it doesn't need to look good. This will eventually be coming off, and then that'll give me some more room just to visualize and see how I want to run the wires. Well, for the most part, I think the harness is back in. A few little things I need to do. I got to put the relays back in. I'm going to transfer them over from the old harness. They worked fine, so why not put those in? The throttle position sensor is still the stock version, so I think it'll be fine to start the car and maybe test throttle, but I don't think it'll have much drivability. The stock switch is kind of on-off, and then what you're supposed to do when you put Megasquirt on the E30 is switch to a later, more variable TPS, just so that you can kind of get, you know, in between 0 and 100. Makes sense. And then on the passenger side, I have to still figure out what to do with my O2 sensor. I'll tee in a vacuum line here, run it through the firewall hole, and I haven't put in the Megasquirt yet, but the Megasquirt will mount up here. My wires. This is my old black wire, and here's my in-car black wire. That wire needs to be connected to make the tack work. So the car was originally the M20 B27E model. So that's just something that needs to be connected when switching from an E to an I engine, not a Megasquirt related thing. But because I had it spliced in, and I actually made a video about that, I had it spliced into the old harness. I have to do it again to this harness. So just a couple things left to do, but the harness has been changed over, and we're one step closer to getting the ITBs on. I think that's going to wrap it up for now. New harness is in, mostly hooked up. We're getting closer. Come back next time. Hopefully we'll have the Megasquirt running the car.